Bounds errors are really common when coding with C++ because when you access memory that is outside the bounds of an array, the program is not going to tell you. And so that can really be a dangerous thing, that you're accessing and possibly updating memory outside of the memory that you were allocated. So we're going to go through this example. This is just a made-up function that I wrote called cancel out, and what it will do is it will look at consecutive cells, and if the sum is 0, they cancel each other out. And so if this array has a condition where the sum is equal to 0, it will return true. It will be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false, right? Okay, so we have this function cancel out. And I'm going to create a Boolean cancels, and it will start off as false. Let me draw my array first. And then I have a Boolean cancels, and it starts out as false. And then I'm going to have a variable sum, and it will be initialized to 0. So I'm going to loop, and here's my index I, and I'll start at 0. And I'm going to put in the sum of num sub I plus num sub 1. And so since I is 0, it's going to add the -4 and the 3 together. And -4 plus 3 is -1. And then it'll ask, or then I'll go ahead and I'll print it out. So it's going to print I, and then the value of I, which is 0, and then sum will be -1. And then if sum is equal to 0, cancels is true. Well, it's not, so we don't update cancels. So then we go back up, and we are going to increment I. So now I has a 1 in it. And then sum will be num sub 1 plus num sub 2. Well, num sub 1 plus num sub 2 is 5. And then I'm going to print out I, and it'll print out 1, and sum will be 5. And then I will increment I. Well, I'll check. Is sum 0? No. So sum or cancel still remains false. So then I'll go back up and I'll increment I, and now I is 2. And then I'll add together num sub 2 and num sub 3. So these two right here. And the sum is 0. So sum now has 0. And then I'm going to print out I. So I is 2, and the sum is 0. And if sum is equal to 0, cancels is true. So now cancels will contain a 1 because now it is true. But then I go up because I'm still looping while I is less than size. And I is 2 right now, and size is 4, so I will be incremented to 3. And then here's where the trouble comes in. So this says add together, this line right here, add together num sub 4, or num sub 3 and num sub 4. Well, -3 or -2 is in num sub 3, but we don't know what is in num sub 4 because there really isn't a num sub 4. That's out of bounds. Okay, so when I add that together, sum is going to be, I don't know what, a big question mark. We'll see when we print out. So then I'll print out I is 3 and then sum, and I have no idea what we'll print there because it added that together. And then it's going to check if the sum is 0. Well, I don't know what's in there. It could be 0. Maybe it's 0. Maybe there was a 2 hanging out in that memory location. And if it is, then we'll set cancel to true, but it's already true. But that could be a problem, right? Because if up until this point cancels is false, and then that cell over there happens to contain 2, it's going to equal 0, and then we're in big trouble. And then it'll go back up, and I will become 4, and then we finish the loop. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see, yes, indeed, when I was 3, it added together that, that memory location 4, which doesn't exist, and it added it to position 3, and that's the number we got. So that's why it's really important to make sure when you are comparing consecutive cells that you end early. What I mean is that you want to stop looping when we're at this position right here. We don't want to go when I is 3. So to fix that in our code, we will loop while I is less than size minus 1. And then when we run that, you can see that we stopped at the correct place.